And we welcome in Dr. Brent Clark, who's the Executive Director, Illinois Association of School Administrators, and the answer to the trivia question, the first ever guest on Issues in Education. He doesn't even know this. There is no prize, don't worry. Dean Langdon, Associate Executive Director, Illinois Association of School Boards, both with us for this segment and beyond. And let's start with you, Dr. Clark, the Illinois Association of School Administrators. So you are working with superintendents? Are you working with principals? What exactly is your...
Superintendents, assistant superintendents across the state, comprising about probably 1,700 to 1,800 different people.
Okay, and you were in Belleville, you were in Benton, and
correct.
Now stationed in Springfield.
That's right. My roots go all the way back to Williamson County, down by Marion and Carbondale, and then I was superintendent in Benton, Illinois, Belleville, Illinois, and then I've been in Springfield now. This is my 11th year.
So it's possible he's been to McCord's Market, owned by my father-in-law in West Frankfort. Dean Langdon, Associate Executive Director, Illinois Association of School Boards, and you're on the school board side of things.
I am. I'm in charge of our training and workshops for the nearly 6,000 school board members across the state.
And we've mentioned it on this show. The school board members, we've had some on the program. They could be somebody's mom or dad or grandma or grandpa. They could own the neighborhood store. These are people from all walks of life.
They could. These are citizens. These are citizens who care an awful lot about their kids and their communities and their taxes. And so they bring a wealth of citizenry-type knowledge to their work in governing their schools.
All right, let's tell folks the big conference that's in Chicago. This is a nice, quiet setting here. That will be chaos. What actually takes place there?
Well, you have three statewide organizations, the School Board Association, the School Administrators, and another organization we call the School Business Officials. The three organizations, all statewide, come together to host a conference the weekend prior to Thanksgiving weekend. It's been hosted in Chicago for more than years than I can remember.
84 years.
There you go. That's more years than I can remember. Mm-hmm. So it's an impressive conference. I think in many ways it may be the largest educational conference in the nation because of the number of people that attend. And there's many years that we push close to 10,000 people by the time you get all the vendors, sponsors, a guest, and association members there.
Are there thousands of people?
You're talking close to 10,000 people.
Now, do they do that? Is that at McCormick? Is that
no,
still?
It's not. It's headquartered really at the Hyatt Regency Place, and we share some space with the Sheraton as well, the Fairmont Hotel, and the Swiss Hotel. So it's headquartered in primarily those four hotels.
And so what takes place? I mean, you mentioned seminars. Is this, so you have a superintendent from Northern Illinois. His issues could be wildly different than the person from Southern Illinois.
Well, I think that's kind of the secret sauce of our conference, the fact that we bring all of these folks together with different expertise. We bring school business officials who can give us expertise in finance and operations. We bring instructional leaders in Brent's group who can tell us a little bit about education and the cutting-edge trends there. And then we bring school board members together to have a conversation about how we can all improve our organizations together, whether it's north, south, east, west.
Yeah, I think that the trick is really just if you've kind of figured out as a superintendent or a board kind of how to resolve a particular issue, coming to this conference and sharing that out so that other districts can learn from what you have figured out and take that back home and implement it.
So they could talk safety, they could talk curriculum.
Absolutely, and they do. They talk finance, they talk legislation, they talk school safety, assessment, accountability, and another a dozen to 15 more issues.
Now, we touched on this with Dennis Young and with Robert Vogel, but I'm curious from your positions, too, how much has the curriculum shifted? And is there a cycle? Is it 5 years later, 10 years later, where it was everybody's got to have a computer, and then now we're saying, what about the trades, and what about some actual labor skills being taught? Is it cyclical? Does it go every 10 years? Or?
Well, I don't know if it's 10. I think it's more tied to the federal Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It drives what the states respond and react to over time. And really, in 2001, 2002, a federal law called No Child Left Behind was passed. Schools across the nation were responding and reacting to that federal law because what it was telling you had to do and how you had to respond. And as a result of that, you saw many of the trades programs beginning to be reduced. And now, here we are 15 years later, and people are looking at each other going, plumbing's still important, electrical's still important, welding's still important. We do need people that know how to do these trades, these vocational skills. And it's starting to make a comeback right along as technology is exploding. Vocational arts, I see them coming back because they're very critical to our economy.
It's kind of amazing to think that on a huge level, that huge program, we all know that that phrase even, no child left, that we would say, oh, we don't need the trades. And I
Well,
said earlier, like Germany's always been good at that.
They didn't necessarily say you didn't need it, but the way they pressured the systems, well, it emphasized the test scores in reading and math. That's what was measured. And the old saying is, what is measured is what matters. And so all your focus, your energy, and your resources were put on reading and math. And everything had to be shelled out to put the more resources there because you had to accelerate your growth every year. And so it took resources away. So districts made decisions. Hey, let's cut a vocational program to put more resources in reading and math. Just an outcome of a federal law.
Dr. Brent Clark is the Executive Director, Illinois Association of School Administrators. Dean Langdon, Associate Executive Director, Illinois Association of School Boards. Let's talk about 2020 and what that initiative is about.
Well, we've put together a group of a number of stakeholders, school administrators, school board members, met with the regional offices. We've tried to make sure we have underrepresented populations in that group to put together a proposal for the vision of education in the state of Illinois. We've got 4 pillars, including highly effective educators. We want to make sure we have the best expertise in the classroom. 21st century learning. How do we go about teaching kids for the next century for the skills that they're going to need for jobs that, frankly, we don't even know about yet. They don't yet exist. Accountability is important. We want to be accountability locally as well as statewide and then nationally. And then we need to talk about funding. Because in the end, this is all going to cost us some dollars, and so we need to have some funding to be the foundation for all of those changes and reforms we want to see locally and then statewide.
The first point of that, you're educating the educators. How hard is it to find qualified teachers, or is it not? Is that ever an issue? Is it now?
Oh, my. Years ago, you would have 100 applications for an elementary teaching job, and now you go to the colleges of education on our universities, the campuses here in Illinois, their populations of future teachers have dropped 80 to 90%. So we're now enrolling 20 or less prospective teachers in colleges of education that used to run 200 and 300 prospective teachers. So the hit is coming. It's present right now in terms of our border counties where teachers are leaving and going to Iowa or Missouri or some other state. It's present in terms of trying to find a substitute teacher when a teacher is absent from the classroom. So as we see difficulties recruiting teachers, it's only a matter of time before we have difficulties recruiting principals and eventually superintendents. So it's an issue that this state has to get a handle on very soon. We have long been in Illinois an exporter of teachers, of educators. And now it's time we're going to have to produce our own for a while and keep them here.
Meaning what? That they're working in Illinois and they take other jobs, or that they go to the Illinois schools, like even University of Illinois, and then they leave here and teach somewhere else?
It's the latter mostly, that they've gone to school here and left to go to another state to get a job. But now today, the new phenomena is that we are not producing enough anymore, because we're now having real shortages hiring teachers.
Yeah, is there a way to quantify it? Because I'm sure maybe it's true across the country. Is it the pay that's a factor? Is it the stress level and nobody wants to do it because it's tireless and thankless? Do we know why?
I don't know that you could say it's one thing, but we can open up the front here and both comment. I would say a couple things is that you've got a lot of commentary over the last 3 or 4 years that's picked at their pay, it's picked at their pension system, it's picked at their work schedule. And there's a lot of stress that comes with being continually made fun of, kind of in a political nature, if you will, and it's not attracted people to the profession. I think, in fact, it maybe has repelled them away from the profession.
Is it, and everything costs money, and we're going to really dig into funding. Is there a imaging marketing campaign that you could go on and do more recruiting and saying, hey, this is a glorified position, this is noble? Is that...
Well, I think we need to do that, but we also need to think about the hurdles for kids wanting to go into the field. The requirements for getting into a teacher education program or the requirements for getting into an administrative program have increased over time to the point where we're having a tough time with some minority candidates getting in. We need teachers, we need administrators that look like our communities. So we need to put together a proposal of standards and regulations that push those folks and support them as they work their way into the profession. There's no shortage of passionate young people that want to be teachers. We need to promote that and lift that up and honor it, as opposed to putting up roadblocks for them getting into the profession.
Is it a rural issue more than urban, or is it both? I mean, in terms of finding teachers and finding principals, is that across the board?
I see it as both. You've got bigger schools. Let's take Galesburg, Illinois, big, very, very large school system north of Peoria. they're having the same difficulties as a far rural western school on the Iowa border, both having similar problems attracting and holding teachers.
What else do you hear from when you're talking to your principals, your superintendents, your school boards? What are the pressing issues right now? And again, we're going to talk funding in our next segment. I know that's number one because it gets the ball rolling. But what else?
Let me add one more piece, in that it's also very acute in particular subject areas: math, science, special education, foreign language. We need to find a way to break down the barriers to get those folks who want to do those kinds of jobs in our schools into our system, and then support them with professional development and help them grow.
And I've always thought, and I'm an idea guy, and people always say, yes, Martin, you have a lot of bad ideas. But I wonder if more retirees could get in, not maybe even full-time, but in the class, people who have been in the business world, who have a math acumen, or somebody who could be a good history teacher, who had an interesting background themselves. And I don't know how you appeal to that audience, but and they may not want to do it 5 days a week, but I feel like there's a really untapped market there.
Well, there is, but we have passed a law that limits them to 100 days of participation a year after they retire. And that was passed almost in a punitive measure because they're drawing a pension, and people felt like they did not need to come back and work and earn anything additional. So
you're talking specifically retired teachers.
I'm talking retired teachers today in Illinois. Yes. And
so so they don't want them double dipping in a sense, but the truth is they could be a valuable asset.
No question. They could be a valuable asset in a variety of ways. They could coach, they could teach, they could do a lot of things. They fulfilled their rightful pension obligations. They're now drawing that pension.
We didn't get into funding because we could really spend 5 hours talking about this. I live in St. Louis. I'm on the Missouri side, and I always see and hear headlines, Illinois budget crisis, Illinois money. Where does it sit now in terms of education? How much of the financial crisis in the state is affecting what you do?
Oh, it severely affects us. Up until this school year, we've been on a 7-year run of declining revenues for schools. This past June, our governor and our legislature did get together and bring us back up to a number that we would have had about in 2009, 2010. So that was the first increase we'd seen in quite some time. But having said that, we are still quite deficit in terms of the amount of revenue that's available across our schools to adequately and sufficiently educate kids for a 2016 or 2017 type of education.
So how do you turn it around? What moves are you guys making?
Right, we're working on this literally every day. We have legislation that we are pushing called the evidence-based funding model. It arose out of the Vision 2020 program that Mr. Langdon referenced earlier in the other set, and it is based in research. It's basically things that have been rigorously researched across our nation over the last 10 or 11 years. It's things that we know that work in schools, and it gives us a way to go to the legislators and say, look, these are the things that work. This is what it's going to cost. If you want to invest in the schools, let's invest in things that we know that work. We can prove it works so that you get a return on your investment as a state. That's seeming to resonate because the return on investment is an important aspect of any type of government program when money is tight, and money is certainly tight in Illinois.
And in terms of our teacher, not only retention but recruiting, you talked about it last segment, Illinois is having a hard time keeping teachers. Is that salary related, or is that pension related? Is it money related? Is that part of the problem?
It's there's a piece of that in all of those areas. I still contend there are numerous folks who certainly have a passion for education and want to go into it. But what we need to do is fix things like our Tier 2 pension situation, where folks going into the profession are certainly not going to get the benefit of a pension that earlier folks going into the profession are now receiving. We need to fix that. We need to fix the hurdles to go into the profession. And then I think overall we need to create a culture where we value our educators at the local level and statewide, and the tremendous service that they bring to communities and then growing our economy statewide. We need to change this notion of what it means to be a teacher and hold them up in high regard.
What about the rankings? When we talk education, there's always state-by-state rankings. How is Illinois in terms of percentage of budget versus other states?
I think we are either 49th or 50th in terms of what the state invests in the schools. Now, it's not necessarily what the schools are spending, because in Illinois we have a very high property tax basis that really it's an over-reliance on the property tax basis that those dollars go into the schools. So there are some schools in Illinois that are doing exceedingly well. But those schools that have a lower assessed value, a lower property wealth, those schools that are in that situation would rely more heavily on the state to fund them. They're the ones that are struggling the most severely because the state funding is cut. They have no local property wealth to supplement that. And so they're just really kind of shortchanged in every regard.
Is there a formula for that where if you, let's say you live in a wealthy area and you have more money at your disposal, then you're less dependent on the state? Do they kind of have an equation there?
Well, we do address it in our current formula, but I think this new proposal in front of us really does a much better job of thinking about the diversity, the property wealth we have throughout the state, and then breaking the state into tiers so that we can provide funding from the state to the local level based upon the real costs of those programs at the local level. You can imagine it, a downstate rural school district certainly does have lower costs than, say, a north suburban Chicago school district. And so this new funding proposal does break the state into some tiers to address some of those costs.
And so the trick in what Mr. Langdon's referring to is in what we call the distribution side of the new funding formula, and that is those first dollars. In fact, 99% of the first money in goes to those lowest funded schools first to help start to bring them up to get on par with their peers across the state. So it's a real addressing of the issue if we can get this proposal passed through the legislature. And I will say this, last May, this proposal in the most respects did pass the Senate. So we expect it to get quite a bit of play when our legislature reconvenes.
And at the conference later, is it next month in November in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
right, the weekend before Thanksgiving, how much of the sessions and the seminars there are funding related or working within the budgets they have?
Well, one of the real benefits of our conference is we will hit every topic. We will have a subset of sessions on finance. We'll have a subset of sessions on operational issues, instructional issues, governance issues. We'll have all of the experts available, and our members really get to choose where they want to attend for their panel sessions. We have 111 panel sessions at our conference, 33 carousel of panels, 10 sessions for district secretaries, 9 pre-conference workshops. You name it, we'll be talking about it. But certainly, I can guarantee that 2 sessions get the most bodies in the room. And that's one is legislative, because we want to know what's happening politically in our communities, and then 2, the finance piece.
So the finance breakout session will be on Saturday morning. Myself and a couple more colleagues are putting that session on.